I'm Dave P. Parry, the founder of Living Adventure. Welcome to this 12-part series designed specifically for use inside of support groups. At the end of this 12 parts, and it's immaterial whether you spend 12 weeks or do it over a period of a year, that's not at issue here. But at the end of this 12-part series, you will have a really good idea of what ADHD is and what it isn't, and you will have a very good idea of what is required to learn to manage this condition. I've entitled this first module ADHD, not a quiet or easy condition. I say it's not quiet because the ADHD brain is very, very noisy. There is just so much that is happening inside the brain. And I've got a great audio clip which you'll listen to a little bit later, which is called The Sound of an ADD Brain. And secondly, it's not easy. It's not easy for us who have ADHD to live with it, and especially if we're unaware and it's untreated. We have no idea why we're always in trouble and why we have such poor relationships, etc., etc. And then, of course, it's not easy to live alongside it. So as parents and as teachers, it's a very, very difficult condition to live alongside. And I make no bones about this whatsoever. We are high maintenance people. So all the more reason to get it managed properly and to use a multidisciplinary way of doing that. The first big myth that we're going to look at is that this ADHD, this hugely complex, difficult condition that has so many different types and nuances of the condition, that has so many co-occurring conditions. It is just incomprehensible that this huge, big, complex condition is reduced to one word, Ritalin. I say to people when they ask me what I do, and I say I work with people with attention deficit disorder. Oh, I suppose you give them Ritalin. Sorry? Excuse me? It's a very complex condition, and unfortunately, this is one of the huge big myths and one of the big controversies. The second thing to really understand is that there are so many people who will seek to profit. Many of them not intentionally. They actually believe that what they're saying or what they're doing is the best thing for it. But it's such a dangerous condition, and I just believe absolutely implicitly that you use the tried and tested first, get it managed, because those are the things that work for most people most of the time. Use those, and then by all means go ahead and use the experiments and try the experimental methods that are constantly being worked out. And let me tell you, if you find something, please give me a shout. I'd love to spread the word. Use the tried and tested, the things that work for most people most of the time. The second big or third one is that it isn't a real condition. At one point, this myth got to such an extent that a group of doctors worldwide, headed up by Dr. Russell Barkley, signed the consensus statement. That document is available to you. Your support group leader should have given it to you. But it is a very, very good document in which these eminent medical professionals, these very learned men, sat down and have made a case for the fact that it is a real condition. Some people even go so far as to say it's mercury poisoning. Now, if that was the case, then everybody would have it. And they say that, the mercury comes from the fish. Everybody eats fish. And how come those people who eat fish haven't got ADHD? So really just be very, very careful. We have a great saying. It's just say no. KNOW. And put yourself on the side of knowledge and knowledge about the condition so that you can make a proper and informed condition. Then this dreadful label that it's an excuse, and a poor excuse, for just bad behavior. This does terrible things to the parents. The big difference is that all kids have bad behavior episodes. The big thing for ADHD is we don't learn from our mistakes, and because we're impulsive, we will do things that are a lot more inappropriate, and we will do them repeatedly. But there are ways around that. And one of the things that happens very early on in life, particularly with the hyperactive kids, is that they suddenly are not invited to their friends' birthday parties anymore because you have ADHD or you have very poor parents. And then finally, they come with this thing about it's madness. Listen, sometimes I feel mad myself, but I'm not mad. And just look at the list of ADHD people who have achieved so much, the Richard Bransons of this world, the Winston Churchills, Einstein, etc., etc. This condition, when it's managed properly and effectively, is a wonderful, great gift, and that's where we need to focus, is on the gifts. Then, of course, probably the most pervasive of all of the myths is this: it's an excuse to obtain drug, and that methylphenidate, the active ingredient in Ritalin and Concerta, is addictive. So let's look at the first part of that one, is that it's an excuse to obtain drugs. Now, it's absolutely true that during the 70s, the 80s, and even part of the 90s, Ritalin was, according to many, the drug of choice on American playground. But what we need to understand that this was ADHD children trading their Ritalin, which they shouldn't have had. It should have been given to them orally already, but they were trading their Ritalin to their friends in exchange for doing their homework, covering up bad behavior. That is what really happened. The second part of the thing is that methylphenidate is addictive, but one of the reasons that the long-acting Ritalin and the long-acting Concerta later on was brought out is because ADD and ADHD kids and adults forget to take it. Now, if it was addictive, I can tell you that we are not going to forget to take it. And coming from that one is the third part, is that ADHD children will become addicts. In fact, there are many studies that prove most conclusively that the group of people least likely to become addicts in later life, in their teenage or young adult lives, are optimally medicated ADD children. You need to understand that. So there's a very good reason to medicate optimally, in particularly that time span from 6 to 10, 12, that area. Carry on in the teenage years, it's just a little bit more difficult. There's a lot more peer pressure, etc. Because what is in fact happening is that untreated ADHD children and adults self-medicate, and we medicate with the dreadful stuff, the mind-altering drugs like heroin and tic, the methamphetamine, etc., etc., and of course cannabis, or dacha as we call it. Another myth is that ADHD was created so that Ritalin would have a market. It is true that Ritalin originally came up as a weight loss drug, but it was found that it actually worked very well. Now, this is pretty standard procedure. There was a recent addition to the medication, was a drug called Provergil. Now, when it came out as an experimental drug and it was listed as such, it had a long list, including schizophrenia, insomnia, all sorts of things, that this drug could be used from. Actually, I had a few clients who tried it and they didn't do very well on it. And in fact, now that they have completed the trials, it is no longer used for ADHD, except by some guys who use it off-label. Nothing wrong with that. But ADHD was around long before Ritalin was. Then another one is, it's a childhood condition. You will grow out of it. So many adults have lived lives of desperate trauma, failure, because they carried their ADD into their adult lives. I was only diagnosed at the ripe old age of 45. And all of a sudden I began to understand why I'd had such a roller coaster of a life. So you don't grow out of it. You'll see later, we're born with it. You don't lose it because you didn't catch it. You're born with it. And you will die with it. But hopefully you will die with it in a much more managed fashion, and that you have enjoyed living with the gift of ADHD. The next one is that ADHD only happens to boys. And when I was diagnosed towards the end of the 21st century, around about 2000, it was true. You know, people thought it was only happened to boys. But the reason was that the inattentive type, which are predominantly female, not exclusively, are quiet. They don't disrupt the class, so they've slipped through the cracks. But let me tell you, I believe that untreated women with ADHD are often much more severely impacted than men are. Then, of course, we get all those other labels. Besides having the label of ADD and depressed and rude and all of those things, we now get labeled as losers. We're lazy, we're stupid, we're fussy, we're arrogant, and even violent. Gosh, Thanks for all those labels, guys.